Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to my Doom Eternal Ultra Nightmare Guide for the Ancient Gods Part 2. This is the end of a trilogy of videos, so if you haven't gone and seen my first two videos, I'd recommend doing that first. This video is going to focus more on the specific levels and certain fights you'll need help with as you go through this second DLC. The video setup is going to be the same as usual. I'm going to start with general tips and tricks, we're going to go over guns and runes, and then we're going to go through the levels and certain fights I think you need help with, and I have certain advice for those fights. Alright, at this point I know I probably sound like a broken record, but practice literally makes perfect. What I would suggest is when you do an Ultra Nightmare run that you go and just kind of do just an immediate run and see how far you get. And let that be your starting point for where you go and practice from there on out. With this DLC, I feel like it's moderately difficult. There's just a handful of fights that I think make it more difficult. Like most of the going through the level is pretty easy, but each level has like one or two fights that are pretty difficult and you need special attention to those fights and certain strategies for each of them. So for me, one thing I struggled with going in was that I was not using the Hellbreaker enough. I was using it kind of like the Crucible, where it's kind of a rare pickup, and that's not the deal with the Hellbreaker. This weapon is great for crowd control, and if you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, it's great to just use it, grab some resources, and then jump out of that danger area and be able to take the fight on again from a different distance at a different angle. One of the things I like to use it for is if I miss an ice bomb, one of the things I'll do is if I'm fighting a Doom Hunter and I throw my ice bomb to freeze it and then attack its sled and I miss, I'll just do the Sentinel Hammer and then that'll stun it and then I'll do what I was going to do the first time. But just learn to get in the habit of using it more frequently and don't be shy about using it. So another important tip is that as you practice the levels, you'll know when the Cursed Prowlers show up. And when they show up, you just drop whatever you're doing and prioritize them. It's important because they can ruin your run. It's happened to me multiple times where I'm doing really good and I'm just not paying attention and I get hit by a Cursed Prowler, I lose all of my health, and then boom, I have to replay levels again. You know when they're going to show up, deal with them right away. It's the first thing you do when they show up. Going and talking more about the new enemies, when you're fighting the Armored Barons of Hell, don't bother using your plasma rifle to break their armor, just use the precision shot. It's just a waste of time and ammo to just do something that you can do really quick. However, when I'm fighting them one-on-one, I like to use the microwave beam and lob grenades while I'm doing that, just so I can keep them outside of their armor and just whittle down their health. It makes it really easy and it's just a one-shot kind of deal. Now, this really shouldn't need to be said, but do not do the second escalation counter. There's no real reason to do it. You have really nothing to prove. You're just trying to beat it on the hardest difficulty. Just don't do it. Just do the first one and move on. You got nothing to prove. Don't worry about it. Okay, and I've given this tip before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. There's a handful of areas that you can fight enemies from a distance where you don't have to engage them head on, and I would encourage doing that. I don't think there's as many in this DLC as there were in the previous one, but there's one or two chances to do it, and just make sure to take advantage of them. I have a funny clip I want to show you real quick. I was in Immora and I was shooting at one of the Arachnotrons at a distance, and this was actually not while I was practicing. This is during me doing it on Ultra Nightmare. And I had this thought to myself as I was doing it. I was like, wait a second, I'm doing this out of order. And then I look to my left and there's a Dread Knight that's like mid-attack, and I dash back and I do not get hit by it. And I was very surprised I didn't get hit by that attack. Okay, moving on to guns and runes. So this is the same, I believe, that I showed in the last video. My setup's still the same. I like to do the glory kills quick. I like to do them from far away. And I like to have the Blood Punch Shockwave. Now, you get the DLC extra one, and I do the Blood Punch one for that. That doubles its power when you're below a certain amount of health. I recommend doing these for the same reasons I mentioned in the previous one. I think they're just best for overall quality of life and panic. The only thing we're going to talk about when it comes to guns is the rocket launcher, because I've had some pretty strong opinions about the remote detonate, and the DLC definitely forces you to use it against the riot soldiers. I still don't like using it. I still think it's kind of dumb. I tend to just use grenades when the riot soldiers show up, and if I'm having trouble with that, I'll just switch over to the remote detonate, do it, and then switch back. If I'm completely honest, the lock-on burst is like the bread and butter of playing Ultra Nightmare safe. You use it all the time, and there's small enemies everywhere, so you can get like unlimited rockets just from doing that. So I should just use the lock-on burst. Alright, now that we have all that out of the way, we can get into the meat of this video, and we're going to talk about the levels. The World Spear is the first level of the DLC, and it's relatively easy. For me, I feel like most of the battles are open enough, and you have enough resources and area to move around that it's not too hard to deal with. The only fight that really you might have to be a little bit weary of is where that fountain pools up with the purple goo, and you have a bunch of little zombies, some Screecher zombies, and then a Mancubus will pop in from the front and one from the back. The best way to deal with that fight is just to use the shield turret and just aim for the head because your mobility is kind of limited there. Besides that, the rest of it's pretty easy. One thing I would take advantage of is during some of the platforming, there's little armor shards that will pop in, and those respawn. So if you just did a battle and you have no armor, you can just go through the platforming, grab those armor bits, and then just jump back and forth grabbing armor until it's full again until you go into the next fight. In my previous video, I mentioned that it's important to bring a BFG shot with you into like each level. For this one, I would suggest bringing in 2. It seems to be pretty generous with the amount of BFG shots, especially in this first level, so try to leave the area with 2. For me personally, the second level is the hardest one of the game, and not because the level is difficult, it's because of the last battle being very difficult. I died there more than I did throughout the rest of it. That includes the final level and the final boss. I don't consider the whole first part of the level to be very difficult. It's pretty easy, and the only thing that you need to pay attention to is where you're using your BFG shots, because you need to for the final fight. Since that final fight gave me such a hard time, this is the only battle I'm going to break through in like really great detail, because it was very difficult for me and I struggled to even practice the fight because I was dying so much in it. So the first wave of the fight starts with a Doom Hunter and a Hell Knight. Not very difficult, you can get through that wave, and then the next wave also has a Doom Hunter and a Cursed Prowler. You take out both of those 2 waves, and then it starts to get difficult. What you'll have to face next is a possessed Mancubus and a bunch of other demons in the room. What I tend to do is right at that moment, I shoot a BFG shot to the other side of the room. That shot will kill everything in the room, including the possessed Mancubus. You'll hop down, you'll hit it with the microwave beam, boom, it blows up. Immediately following that, you want to go look for the Arch Vial that's going to show up. I would recommend using your second BFG shot to take him out. So after you fight those 2 hard waves using the BFG shot, you'll have to deal with a Baron of Hell and a Tyrant. That's really the 2 big threats that are going to be there, along with a couple of the invisible pinkies. Again, you can take advantage of using the Sentinel Hammer to stun enemies, use your Ice Bomb to stop big enemies from doing damage if they get too close. There's a lot of different ways you can tackle this, and I would just encourage you to practice that fight a ton, because it is incredibly frustrating when you practice that fight a lot and then decide to go do that battle on Ultra Nightmare, and you go through the level, you get to that last fight, and then you die. So at the end of that experience, if you are completely out of BFG shots, that's not too bad, because going into this next one you can build up 2 without too much of a hassle. Alright, so now we're on to Immora, which is the last level before the boss fight. The first real battle you'll face is an escalation encounter, which is not very difficult. It was actually probably the easiest one of the entire DLC for me. The area that they give you is really big, and you can use these lifts to bounce from one side to another. Really easy, get away from stuff really quick. During that fight, you'll have the opportunity to pick up a BFG shot. I would not use it. You're going to pick up 2 and then use 1 in the last fight. Once you go inside the city, you'll be faced with a difficult threat of fighting 2 Marauders. In the past, I've given some advice on how to deal with 2 Marauders. You're going to take that advice and throw half of it out the window. Since you just completed this 3rd escalation encounter, your Sentinel Hammer is upgraded with an extended stun. You're going to take advantage of this when dealing with these Marauders. What you're going to want to do is listen to my first piece of advice, which is to get them next to each other and treat them as one. That way when you hit them, they're both stunned, you use the Sentinel Hammer, wham, they're stunned for extra time. What's going to be different now is that now that that opening is there, you're going to take out your rocket launcher, and you're going to hit one of them twice with the lock-on burst. This will kill them, and then you will just rinse and repeat for the second one. After you deal with those 2 Marauders, you have to fight a Baron of Hell. That's not super difficult since it's really only him you have to worry about. The main thing you have to worry about is when you use your Sentinel Hammer, you might hit a Screecher Zombie, and that could affect the Marauders or the Baron of Hell later. It's annoying if that does happen, because that means it's going to take more than 2 lock-on bursts to kill the Marauder, but it's not the end of the world, because there's little monkey bars you can swing from to stay away from stuff. You can move really quick. Of course, you can try to keep them in the middle of the area, but sometimes that doesn't work because there's a Screecher down there as well. So if it does happen, just stay away from the enemy for a bit. It'll go back to normal, and then you can use that same strategy again. One thing I wanted to mention is that Maker drones are in this level quite predominantly, and they're very nice because they're just mobile health packs. I used to not like this enemy until I got good at the precision shot or using the ballista to just take care of it. Absolutely love this enemy. It's really helpful when you get hit by something big and then you see one, you can just quickly get some health back. The only other fight you have to worry about with Immora is the last fight. And you'll know it because it starts with a little cutscene of the Dark Lord walking away, and then you're immediately encountered with a handful of enemies. What you're going to want to do with that fight is immediately go to your left, and once you go up, there's going to be a cursed prowler that will show up right there. Take him out first, and then turn and deal with the tyrant. Within that arena, there is a BFG shot, and as you practice that fight, kind of learn when's the best time to use it. There's a handful of things you'll have to deal with that are difficult, including a possessed Baron of Hell. And you can choose to use the BFG shot then. I tend to use it before then, and then just deal with that on its own, and then there's another wave after that with an armored Baron. That's really the only BFG shot I would encourage using during the level, because you want to leave with 2. It's not the end of the world, but it helps in really tough situations where you have to act really fast to have that on you for the last battle. On that note, we'll go ahead and talk about the last battle of the game, which is the Dark Lord. Once I developed that strategy for fighting the Marauders, I thought I could incorporate that into the final fight with the Dark Lord, and it turns out it works really well. So when you stun him, you do the Hellbreaker move, and it extends that stun period, and then you can hit him 3 times with a rocket launcher, and it does about half of his health. I think it does different increments at different times. The one thing that you really need to pay attention to when you're doing the last battle is if you have a Sentinel Hammer ready. And this really only applies to the last 2 little pieces of his health, because he'll summon like a large army of like holographic demons to fight you, and that can kill you really quick. The rest, I mean, him by himself is not very difficult to deal with. It's the stuff that he summons that's the actual threat. And the nice thing about that is the Sentinel Hammer will immediately kill any of those summons that he brings in. So having one on hand is really nice. And if that happens and you don't have a Sentinel Hammer on hand, that means it's a good time to use those BFG shots that we brought. And that's the real reason you want to have those, is in case that happens, you don't have a hammer ready, you can still get rid of the threat and then continue on with the fight. When you're in those last 2 pieces of health, it's important to always try to have a Sentinel Hammer on hand. And I wouldn't rely on just the dog spawning to get that. I would rely more on, you know, getting out just your regular shotgun, approach a zombie, hit him at the right distance that he goes into a glory kill state. You do that 2 times, and then you'll get that Sentinel Hammer. Overall, I didn't consider the Dark Lord to be a very difficult boss in comparison to some of the other bosses you'll have to fight. I think the first DLC is much more difficult when it comes to a final boss, and with this one, just a little bit of practice and some preparation in the fight will go a long way and make it really easy. But that's it for me. I have done an entire trilogy of Ultra Nightmare runs, and I'm glad that it's done. I don't have that hanging over my head anymore, but it was a fun run. I really enjoyed doing this. I enjoyed the challenge it brought. It was something that I really haven't done before, and I think it's inspired me to do other stuff and other difficult things when it comes to gaming. So I think this was really fun. I would encourage you to do it just for fun. Don't get too stressed out if it's too difficult, but hopefully my tips and tricks have been able to help you push you through where you're stuck. But as always, you can hit me up on my social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is the best way to reach out to me, and all that's in the description below. But I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. If you have extra tips and tricks that you'd like to share, leave a comment below. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.